Hi, I'm Stephanie Zelnick. I'm here with you today to talk about playing clarinet and wind instruments at higher elevations. When I started looking into this subject years ago, as I was driving back and forth from my position at University of Kansas to play in different orchestras throughout Colorado, sometimes at 8, 9,000, even sometimes 10,000 feet, I started thinking there's not a lot of information on this really important topic. What do we need to do if you find yourself in a situation where you want to take an audition or perform at a higher elevation? I'm here in front of beautiful Mount Elbert in Twin Lakes, Colorado, at about 9,600 feet, and we just climbed that mountain and played on top yesterday. That's Mount Elbert. It's at 14,439 feet. I'm doing this as part of a research topic that lets us know more about what we can do physically as musicians and also find out what we can take from these kind of extreme circumstances into typical concert performances. This is part of a research project entitled Ultra Musician, where we learn from our discipline, but also outside of our discipline, to learn how to even exceed more on these instruments. So thanks for joining me today. So playing at higher elevation is such a tricky subject. Sometimes we talk to people and they say, oh, I've got to go up to Denver, I have to go to Salt Lake City, I have to go to Mexico City, I have to play a recital or a performance. What do I do to sound my best up there? As we get into this subject, I think it's first important to look at physiologically what happens to us as we ascend in elevation. So at sea level, we have certain physiological processes in our bodies that we're used to that change quite a bit, quite dramatically as we go up to higher elevations. Barometric pressure makes it so we have less oxygen in every breath as we ascend. This actually has quite a dramatic effect on all the functions of our body. We start increasing our red blood cell production to oxygenate more effectively, and that's a big difference. To put this in layperson's terms, you'll feel like you have a lot less of an easy time breathing, a lot less oxygen. You'll breathe more often. When you start getting into really high altitude, as your body becomes more hypoxic, you'll actually start taking that oxygen away from your extremities and putting it towards your heart and your brain. The body will definitely put as a necessity staying alive. So you'll find things like moving your fingers, forming a good embouchure, that's going to change quite a bit. Something else you'll find at higher elevations is dryness increases quite a bit. So I'm going to talk to you about gear specifically for clarinet, but a lot of this stuff actually will make sense on all wind instruments as well, kind of help you get a good setup as you go higher. So you don't need to go up to 14,000 feet to get these lessons. I'm going to tell you everything that I learned up there that's going to make more typical concert settings around that 5 or 6 or 7,000 foot mark a little bit easier for you. It is really important to understand that there's a big medical component behind all of this. So this is not medical advice. I'm a doctor of the clarinet, but I'm not a medical professional. So none of this should be taken as professional medical advice. Please check with a doctor before you go up to higher elevations and make sure everything's okay, and never start any new physical strenuous activity until you get an all clear from your medical provider. There's certain high altitude conditions it's really important to be aware of as you go up to higher elevations. These include the most typical one, acute mountain sickness or AMS, less frequent, especially at the elevation that I'm at here at 9,600 feet, would be HAPE or HACE. You find those more as you descend even higher. HACE is high altitude cerebral edema, and HAPE is high altitude pulmonary edema. So the first one, acute mountain sickness, this is something that people can encounter certain degrees of as they go up higher. You definitely want to pay attention to nausea, headache, changes of behavior, and most importantly, descend and seek medical attention right away. Mountaineers that go up definitely into the Himalayas, but even at these elevations, also can encounter really serious conditions such as high altitude cerebral edema or high altitude pulmonary edema because you're changing the composition of your blood pretty severely. Sometimes you'll have a diuresis of the kidneys and you'll actually ditch a lot of plasma into your system, and this can actually turn into an edema in your brain or in your lungs. So this is not stuff to be taken really lightly. And when I climbed that mountain, I've got years of mountaineering experience, and so be careful if you're going to go up high. But you won't encounter these usually in typical concert settings, so don't be scared. If you're going to Denver, you might have a little bit of a headache and kind of find yourself out of breath, but you shouldn't encounter anything that's this severe. But it's good to know what the extreme is to account for something even easier than that. So the most common things that you'll find, like I said before, you're going to be a little bit out of breath. If you're a clarinet player or a wind player, your reeds are definitely going to feel dry. You'll find maybe a slight headache and just feeling a little bit off. Some things that really can be affected as well are sleep. And so make sure that you're really paying attention to just conditioning and what you need for sleep hygiene and nutrition. And we're going to dig into that as well. So to simplify all of this, so if you're traveling up to altitude, what I suggest is a simple acronym that I like to say CARE, C-A-R-E, and that's conditioning, acclimatization, reeds, and endurance. I'm going to break down each of these so when you leave here today, you actually have a really clear understanding of a plan that can help you play at these higher elevations. And what's great about this as well is not only is this going to help you at higher elevations, so definitely general conditioning will help your body compensate for any added strain. This is really important when it comes down to cardio, strength training, and lots of stretching. Stretching is actually really important. If you give your lungs a lot more capacity between your intercostal muscles to expand, then you're just going to have an easier time taking breaths. So try to optimize good posture and really good breathing techniques as well. So hydration is, of course, wildly important when you get up to higher elevations. But remember, this doesn't necessarily mean drinking as much water as possible. You don't want to upset your electrolyte balance. So make sure that you're also using some sort of electrolytes as well. And you don't want to drink so much water that you get into a hyponatremic state and actually make things worse. But definitely make sure that you really pay attention to hydration at these higher elevations. Nutrition is equally important. Usually mountaineers, they'll recommend a great balance of nutrient-dense foods. Prioritize protein and really food that's going to give you energy throughout the day. So think about a good mix of nutrient-dense foods and work to make sure that you have a great balance of food that's going to give you a steady stream of energy throughout your time at higher elevations. Alcohol, sometimes if you drink too much, it can actually mimic a lot of the signs of high altitude conditions that I described before, and it can make you a little bit dehydrated. So make sure that you're actually not partaking of too much at those higher elevations as well. Prioritizing sleep is a major thing. So make sure that you're really emphasizing your sleep hygiene, especially when you go up to higher elevations as well, just to prioritize getting enough rest for sure. There's other things that you can do for higher elevations that I haven't used myself, but things that mountaineers use. Some of them have anecdotal wisdom about upping their intake of ginger and garlic. I have no evidence on this. In any of these mountain towns, some people sometimes will stop into a store and they'll grab little canisters of oxygen if you're feeling especially bad. Again, I don't recommend this only because I don't have any experience in this realm, but it's something just to know about for general knowledge. If you're really worried about going to a super high elevation, again, check with your doctor. Sometimes professional mountaineers will actually use medications as well to kind of ease the transition to higher elevations. Again, I'm just mentioning this as reference point because I don't really have any experience with anything else. I find that by paying attention to my general conditioning, I haven't needed really anything beyond this. So I hope my tips can help you today and you don't need to do anything more extreme than the things we're talking about. So we've talked about conditioning. This is great, not only for traveling up there to higher elevations, but it's just great for your life as a performer. So the second part of this acronym, CARE, as you remember, is acclimatization. And this is something I really want to talk to you about today because it's specific to playing at higher elevations. Get out to these higher elevations as far ahead of time as you can. Now, this is of course challenging, especially for musicians. We're usually on a tight budget and we just don't have that time in our schedules or finances to be able to go out for a week to these higher elevations. If you can though, that's great. Go out, take some hikes. And my recommendation is to always make things a little bit harder than what you're gonna need to do. So if you have a performance at 6,000 feet, I would go take a hike at 8,000 feet, just so you're used to breathing a little bit harder and the compensations you have to make at those higher elevations. That's gonna help you so much to feel comfortable at your audition or your performance. The general knowledge is every 1,000 feet of elevation over 5,000 feet, you can do about 3% less. So it's good to get used to that and let your body get used to the higher elevations to kind of cut that percentage down and feel like you can optimize your performance at these higher elevations. So for this Mount Elbert hike and concert that we just did, I got out to Colorado on Friday and climbed up to over 14,000 feet and performed on Monday. It was a little bit tight. What I did to train for that was going up to 12,000 feet and getting used to playing up there and then descending. Usually what we say is train high, sleep low. I find that this really works for me. I'm sleeping at an elevation of 8,000 feet, even though I'm going up to 14,000 feet, and that helps my body recover at night. The first night I came out, I did spend the first 2 nights at around 5,000 feet, and the slower you can ascend, and especially with your sleeping altitude, that's really important. So again, with acclimatization, try to get out to those higher elevations as early as you can before a performance or audition. One final note on conditioning and acclimatization that I'd like to note: relaxation is so key at these higher elevations. Part of the strain on your body is physical, but part of the strain is mental. You start getting up to these higher elevations, your heart rate goes up, and you feel like you're not getting enough oxygen. It's easy to panic. And then you put that energy into tension, different parts of your body, and that's going to make the strain on your body and your breathing even harder. So I find the key to playing at higher elevations, whether you're in an opera house at 8,500 feet or on top of a 14er, is to relax. And this is something that really transfers from the mountains to sea level and everywhere. Your body is going to be optimal for the best performance if you relax. Just take a deep breath. And that's really the best thing you can do for conditioning and acclimatization. At this point, I would love to move on to reeds. And this is a little bit clarinet specific. If you're a non-clarinetist, you could take a nap at this point, but you also might find some things in here that work for your instrument as well. For me, when I'm going up to higher elevations, instrument care in reeds is really important. It's important to note that I am not playing my good clarinet outside or at higher elevations. So really what I'm doing standing out here is not good for this clarinet, but this is my 3rd string clarinet, so it doesn't matter. This is the last thing that you actually want to do, is what I'm modeling right now. So take good care of your instruments. Make sure that you're really optimizing humidity. This can be as easy as getting a humidifier for your case or putting orange peels in there, which is good for you as you're going up to get that extra vitamin C as well. So just take some orange peels, put it in your case where it's not touching the clarinet. That's going to kind of help humidify everything in there. And then there's also anywhere from that up to a spectrum of just absolutely beautiful humidified systems and cases right now. Key for reeds is you're probably going to go a little bit softer as you go higher, because each breath is going to contain less oxygen as you go higher. So I always go down a little bit in reed size, but definitely when I went up there, I went down a lot on reed size. So usually I play on a 3.5 plus or a 4 Van Doren on top of 14,000 feet. I was on a 2.5 that still felt like a 5. Usually I'll go down to about a 3.5 if I'm playing in Denver or somewhere around the 6,000 or 7,000 foot mark. It's important to take a variety of reeds out with you to have a whole selection of what works for you. Also, get to know your reed knife or your reed geek so you can make little changes and work with a teacher who can really show you how to optimize your reeds. Make sure that you're breaking your reeds in really slowly so your xylem and phloem on the reeds are condensing down so there's no instability in that reed when you're trying to adjust it. And remember, when you're adjusting a reed, you can't add it back on, so it's better to take too little off and then make sure you're trying your reeds a little bit gradually like that. Key is take a bunch of reeds out in different sizes and keep them humidified. Higher elevations, especially in the United States, are typically going to be a lot drier. So I have a case that has a humidifier in there. I have a humidity system in my clarinet. I also have, and this is my super secret here, get a mouthpiece cap. I love this yellow one. I do a lot of pit work, so I have to find my mouthpiece cap in a pit. I can definitely find this yellow color. And I always take a humidified sponge, cut it out in the shape of my mouthpiece cap. I put it in there, and then I'll always put it over my reed. So when I'm ready to go play, it's the humidity that my mouth is, not at this higher elevation. So I know that when I pick up that clarinet, even in extreme settings like this, I can play and it's going to sound really consistent, which is important. So that's really what you need to think of reeds and also your equipment. The last part that we want to talk about with really learning how to play your best at higher elevations is endurance. And this is really important, ties back into conditioning that you're going to do at the beginning. This is going to make this instrument specific and make you feel like you're not out of breath and you're not getting tired. Definitely, if there's less oxygenation going through your blood cells, you're going to feel like you don't have enough air to do things. So what you want to do is have a series of exercises that makes you feel really comfortable and that you're not struggling at the ends of phrases. Again, this is going to tie back in with relaxation. If you feel like you're running out of air, you're going to panic, and that's going to take energy away from your performance. With endurance, it's really important to go gradually. I have two main tricks. One is pretty obvious, which is long tones. You can do your scales super slowly, progressively slowing them down. What I like to do is I like to put a metronome on 100 and do 1 octave of each of my scales, 4 beats to each note. Then I'll slow that down as I do the next scale to 96, gradually slow down 92, 88, get slower and slower gradually, so there's no strain as I'm expanding the range of my long tones. The second one is a little bit less obvious, and this is something that I do a lot just to make sure I feel really comfortable in a phrase. I'll take a phrase, and then I'll play it at about the tempo I want it to go. Then I'll gradually slow it down to about double the speed or half the speed of what I have to play it at. This helps me know that when I play it at the speed that it needs to go at, I'm not going to be struggling for air at the end. Another thing I can do is when I play a phrase, at the very end, I'll actually hold the last note longer than I think I need to. I'll do this several times, and I'll gradually hold the last note longer and longer, so I don't feel like I'm struggling for breath when I'm just playing that the length that it needs to go. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about on an excerpt from Rose 11 out of 32. I'm just going to play it at the standard speed, which at this elevation is going to be a little bit tough. And I'm gradually going to slow it down just a little bit. Remember, relaxation is also key when you're building endurance. So I took a breath in there. Now I'm going to try to do it really in a relaxed way, calming myself down, and I'm going to try not to take that breath. I'll take another deep breath. I'm really going to relax. This time, I'm going to try it with no breath, and I'm going to try holding that last note even longer. It's amazing what endurance work and relaxation can do for your playing. Now, what I would do with this is I would go gradually slower and slower, taking time to relax and build my endurance gradually. I'll do this at sea level, and I'll definitely do this as soon as I get up to these higher elevations. Remember, relaxation is your best friend. This is really going to help you with your air and just in general, even if you're not at higher elevations. The last thing about elevation is don't forget to have a good time. So many of these places are beautiful that you're going to be traveling to. So get out, get into nature, look around, and don't forget when you get into that concert hall or into that audition setting, how beautiful this music is that you're playing. Relax and have a good time.